Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, Headliner Nation, what is going on? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and it is time for our Week 5 wide receiver start and sit matchups. And we're going to be going in depth on all the matchups taking place this coming week. And before we get into it, like we always do, we talk about our start and sit or our accuracy percentages from the week before. But we had a lot of stud duds this week, right? I mean, you probably know it already because if a lot of you had these guys on your team, you're feeling it right now. But it just continues the trend that we saw this season where there is just a lot of inconsistencies among players right now. So before I show you my percentage, I want to show you 12 players, all of which finished with less than 10 half PPR points. Because again, remember, that is our cutoff. If we list somebody as a start and they get 10 or more half PPR points, that's considered a hit. If they get less, it's considered a miss. So 11 of the 12 guys I'm getting ready to show you, I missed on last week, but nobody was sitting them. So it's really tough to see. Those stud duds from last week: Antonio Brown, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp. DeAndre Hopkins doesn't count against me because I actually listed him as a sit and got that one correct. So he doesn't count as a miss against me. But Brandon Cooks and Keenan Allen, all of these guys finishing with less than 10 half PPR points, all the way ranging from wide receiver 33 to wide receiver 58. We also have Chris Godwin, Courtland Sutton, Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett, CeeDee Lamb, and Mike Williams. Mike Williams probably being the hardest one to look at there, ranging anywhere from wide receiver 59 to wide receiver 104. So again, lots of studs this week, a lot of guys that we were starting no matter what, right? You were probably putting these guys in your lineup. So I got to take the L on them. That's how it happens around here. Even if it was the guys that we are going to start, if they don't get it, I take the L on it. So what is our accuracy percentage from this week? Let's put it up on the screen. It is an abysmal 59%. It stinks. It really, really does. But it happens. Nothing I can do about it. Again, lots of studs. If 11 of these 12 studs would have actually had 10 points last week, I would have had 70% instead of 59%. That just goes to show you how thin of a line that we have to walk here when when a lot of these guys don't end up performing. It's like, well, you were starting them anyway, right? Like, why would I have sat Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown why? Nobody would have. Nobody was sitting Mike Williams, CeeDee Lamb. It wasn't happening. But it is what it is. It's in the past. We got to look forward now, and we got to focus our attention on week 5. But we got to talk about our October giveaway. We had a banging giveaway for September and October. We are going to take it one step further. Ladies and gentlemen, if you head over to prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app and sign up for a new account using code word headliners and deposit at least $20, PrizePicks is going to match whatever your deposit is. And you are going to be entered into our October giveaway, which includes everything that you see here on the screen. A signed Christian McCaffrey jersey. You're going to get a gift card to Fanatics. You are going to get yourself, oh my God, there's just so much here. A Manscaped Perfect Package. Who wouldn't want their hands on everything here? And then also a little bit of a mystery prize to go along with it there. An autograph for you too. So if you head over to prizepicks.com or download the app, you are going to get your shot at this package for this week or for this month. But ladies and gentlemen, it's time to roll. We got to get into the matchups, and let's kick it off with Thursday Night Football. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's lock it in. Let's get comfortable here, and let's get ready to roll. The LA Rams are going to be headed out to Seattle on Thursday Night Football, and for the LA Rams, Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson are going to be starts for me, while Robert Woods is going to head to the bench for the first time this season. He had a decent week last week, but Jefferson feels like the number 2 in this matchup. Seattle allows over 40 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, but they also allow the 9th most receiving yards to wide receivers. They can give up some big plays, and Van Jefferson has shown to be that guy so far. Over on the Seattle bench, I've got Tyler Lockett and Freddie Swain as a start this week and DK Metcalf as a sit. Now, before you yell at me about sitting DK Metcalf, listen closely. Number one, I had DeAndre Hopkins as a sit last week. It was spicy for sure. It ended up playing out right. The thing about DK Metcalf, the last 2 games in which he has faced Jalen Ramsey, he has only had 1 reception on 4 targets for 11 yards. Jalen Ramsey has owned DK Metcalf up to this point. He is also my prize picks prop to watch for this matchup because I've got him hitting the under of 5.5 receptions for this game. I don't like the matchup going against Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey is going to follow DK Metcalf. In their last 2 matchups, he was locked on DK Metcalf both games. So for Tyler Lockett, a game in which he stays away from the Ramsey matchup connection, he goes to Tyler Lockett a lot more in this matchup. And then Freddie Swain is a guy that has touchdowns in 2 games this season. And in those games that he scores a touchdown, he has 9 targets in both of those games. He is a guy that is actually out on the field quite a bit right now. And because of the tough matchup for DK Metcalf, in which, listen, if you own him, you're probably going to start him. I'm not telling you to sit DK Metcalf on your bench, but I am telling you that I expect him to have less than 10 fantasy points in half PPR leagues this week. As bad as the offense has looked for the New York Jets, the defense actually has not been that bad. This is a team that isn't there, and it's going to take a little bit of time. But Robert Saleh, I mean, this is a guy that is getting his team to buy into what he's doing. So congrats to him because he's doing some good things there. For the New York Jets, like I said, the offense isn't great right now, but Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder will be starts for me this week. Last week, Davis and Crowder combined for 11 receptions on 16 targets and 172 yards and scored twice. Now they're going to get Atlanta, who allows the 7th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers and the 2nd most touchdowns on the season to wide receivers. For Elijah Moore, I've got him listed as injured, out, doubtful, because I don't know his injury status of right now. That could change some things with Jamison Crowder. But going up against Atlanta, which the run game for the Jets has been short of basically nothing at this point, expect them to still throw the ball a little bit. They're trying to get Zach Wilson out there and going, so expect them to throw the ball. For Atlanta, Calvin Ridley is going to be a start for me, but he's going to be much lower in my rankings this week. The Jets allow the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season, but really what has happened, it's because they've been attacked on the ground, right? That's kind of what has happened with the Jets. So the Jets have allowed the most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So that right there is going to tell you, yeah, we're going to be taking a look. Cordarrelle Patterson is obviously going to be used out of the backfield quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see them try and slam the ball with Mike Davis a little bit, give Wayne Gallman a few touches. But I expect targets and yards and not touchdowns. And that's why I've got Calvin Ridley a little bit lower. I mean, they have faced Sutton, DJ Moore, Jacoby Myers so far, and they've put up some decent stat lines, but they're not really scoring the touchdowns. They're putting up the numbers elsewhere. So for me, Calvin Ridley, targets are still there. Receiving yards will be there, but it's the score this week that I don't think happens, and that is what could keep them lower in the rankings. Green Bay and Cincinnati, and for the Green Bay Packers, as of right now, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, IR for a while. So the number 2 on this team is Randall Cobb, and Cincinnati allows the 8th fewest yards per game to running backs. So what does that mean for this team? Maybe A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones don't have the type of week that we saw last week where they were both running everybody over. Burrow's going to be throwing it around. There's probably no Joe Mixon for Cincinnati this week. That means Green Bay is going to have to be throwing it around. Someone's got to catch the ball there after Devontae Adams. Bobby Tunyon hasn't done anything. Aaron Jones has been pretty good in the passing game, but Randall Cobb, I expect to have a decent game out of the slot this week. On the road in Cincinnati, Cincinnati. I think this is going to be competitive. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I've got T. Higgins listed as a start right now. It sounds like we should expect him back as long as there's no setbacks. He is expected to start practicing this week. He may have already by the time this was recorded, but he is expected to be practicing, which means he probably should be expected back. Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, both of these guys are going to be starts for me. There is no mix in this week, so I am expecting them to throw it quite a bit. And Green Bay's been pretty good against the pass so far. I know they give some guys like Kevin King a lot of crap, but they haven't been that bad. But they've played New Orleans, Detroit, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh. None of those teams are really the, big time passing game, right? Yeah, they might throw it quite a bit, but nothing has been consistent about any of these teams' passing game this year. And on top of it, Jair Alexander is expected to miss some time. Their number one cornerback is going to be out. Detroit at Minnesota, and I've got Khalifa Raymond and Quintez Cephas both as starts this week. Minnesota finally stopped the pass last week, right? They faced Cincinnati, Arizona, and Seattle. They finally did a lot better last week going up against Cleveland, but was that because of the defense or Baker Mayfield was just bad last week? But we know Detroit's going to be throwing it a lot. So I don't think we're expecting like top 30 or top 35 or something like that out of these wide receivers. I think we're expecting on the lower side in that wide receiver 3 type of realm. And Raymond, for me, still talked about it on the waiver wire. He's still kind of the safer bet for me right now. Quintez Cephas is having some bigger plays, but Khalif Raymond is the guy that I think is getting looked at in the red zone a little bit more often, is becoming that safety blanket for Jared Goff. For the Minnesota Vikings, I mean, we're going Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, of course. Somehow Detroit has barely allowed 30 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, but Marquise Brown let him off the hook a couple of weeks ago. Like, if he hauls in 2 or even 3 of those touchdown passes that he dropped, I mean, we're probably looking at a different type of score for the Detroit Lions. And Chicago against Detroit last week, I think they would have even had more if Matt Nagy and Lazar there, they would have actually like aired it out a little bit more. They did, but they ran the ball so freaking much that just kind of the upside was never there. So they've kind of been let off the hook the last couple of weeks. So this 30 fantasy points per game for Detroit, it's probably actually close to being a lot worse than what it is. The Broncos are headed to Pittsburgh, and for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game right now to wide receivers. But you know what? If Green Bay didn't choose to run the ball 30 times last game and actually throw it a little bit more, it could have been worse, right? There could be a lot more points. I mean, they're barely separated from being up into the top 5. They're only a couple of points away from being top 3 even in terms of most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, I'm going to be rolling with both of these guys as a start this week. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the only guy that I am going with is Deontay Johnson. I don't love the matchup against Denver. Big Ben at this point, he's dealing with a hip injury apparently. I don't know what that means for the rest of the week or if he's even going to be able to participate. And the offense has just looked like garbage, right? I mean, it looks bad. Big Ben looks awful. I mean, a lot of people right now are like, oh, Juju, he sucks. He's no good. But I mean, it's because of how bad. I mean, Ben's basically throwing it up to Deontay Johnson when he's healthy and on the field. And then he also threw it up to Chase Claypool a couple of weeks. But this is not a well-oiled machine right now. This is a really, really bad offense. And we don't know about Chase Claypool yet. So we kind of got to keep an eye on that. That hamstring injury from last week that popped up midweek, definitely no good. Obviously, for a guy that drives down the field like he does, you got to have your hammies. So we'll continue to monitor that throughout the week. Miami will get to head to Tampa Bay, who is probably glad to be done in New England at this point. But for Miami, Tampa Bay, their secondary is banged up, right? I mean, we saw it even on Sunday Night Football that it was tough. I mean, they had guys going down left and right, it felt like. Maybe it was the weather or the field conditions. They were banged up even a little bit before that. So that's a problem with this secondary. And they just brought Richard Sherman in, but I mean, it's Richard Sherman. I mean, he hasn't done anything in months at this point. So we'll see how he goes up against as he progresses throughout the season. Obviously, this game on Sunday night was kind of a sloppy, miserable, all over the place. But, I mean, Mac Jones looked pretty darn good, didn't he? Anyway, I digress. But Tampa Bay, their secondary is banged up, and they're still allowing the most receptions and fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and they are allowing the second most receiving yards to opposing wide receivers. So Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle, both of them will be starts for me this week. And Devontae Parker, him and Mike Gesicki have really benefited from Jacoby Brissett becoming the new quarterback after Tua went down with his injury. For Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown. We're starting all of them. You can't sit any of them, especially with no Rob Gronkowski. That only helps this situation for the wide receivers even more. Expect all three of these guys to see plenty of targets. Tampa's going to want to bounce back after that kind of, I don't want to say miserable performance, but that subpar performance from the offense. I think they're going to want to bounce back this week, and they're going to want to do it in a big way. Nolans at Washington, and I hate these plays for the New Orleans Saints. But I'm going to start Marquez Callaway and Deontay Harris. I hate both of them. I hate it. But Washington is allowing 45 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers right now. So it's the third most in the league. How do you sit either of these guys? Now, one may hit and the other won't. And it might be vice versa, or neither of them hit, or both of them hit. These were probably like some of my most gut-wrenching trying to make a call on this week, because Marquez Callaway last week showed, 30 yards per reception. He showed that, he showed that big playability again, but it was only 2 receptions on 2 targets for like 70-something yards. In half PPR formats, that's 8.5 points. So he wouldn't have been a hit last week. Deontay Johnson, he had 8 targets last week, but he didn't do anything with them. And that's kind of the issue right now is these guys, yeah, they're getting some looks and some big plays, but there's just not enough of it. There's not enough of it. And they didn't target Alvin Kamara at all last week. Are they going to do it this week? So again, going up against Washington, I got to list them as starts because the matchup tells me to, but I don't like this offense. I don't like this play, and I'd rather stay away from these guys this week. But on the flip side for Washington, Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel are going to be starts for me. We know Terry is a start, right? We're putting Scary Terry in, but how high is he going to go? New Orleans does allow the 9th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but Terry M has been a little inconsistent this year. He's had a couple of big performances and a couple of smaller performances. We got to hope big performance is coming up with this week, and I'm expecting some extra targets for Curtis Samuel this week. Logan Thomas, obviously banged up this past week, ended up leaving the game. What's the status? How long is this going to be a time miss? So if there's no Logan Thomas, for me personally, there's more for Curtis Samuel. Philadelphia at Carolina, and Devonta Smith is the only wide receiver that I can start for the Philadelphia Eagles right now. He's really only the guy, the wide receiver that's getting a decent amount of looks. The tight ends are getting a lot of looks right now. Goddard and Ertz are both being used quite often, and there's really no upside for me this week either because Carolina does allow the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So they have been pretty darn good this year against the pass. And this is not an offense that screams, oh my gosh, we're airing it out against this team. They're going to have to be quick with it because that pass rush from Carolina is going to get to you fast. So yeah, hopefully with Devonta Smith, we're running some quick routes with him. But this speaks more to me about the tight ends this week than it does for any of these wide receivers. And for Carolina, we're going back to DJ Moore. And don't worry, those of you that have been harassing me about him being too low in my rankings, he's not going to be too low in my rankings this week. Last week, yes, Stefon Diggs did play, or Stefon Diggs, wrong player. It was tough, right? It was a tough matchup against Diggs on the other side of the ball for Dallas, but DJ Moore, he still got all that volume. He was still able to get away from Diggs just enough to be able to make enough plays and have a great week. And he scored a couple of touchdowns. Like, absolutely great to see DJ Moore. Like I said, I was on him before the season started. He was one of my must-haves, so it's great to see him. And for those of you that are upset about Robbie Anderson, I can't sit him. I can't sit him because he got 11 targets last week, did nothing with those targets. Terrace Marshall Jr. hasn't done anything to break out yet. Dan Arnold is gone. CMC is out injured. Who are you supposed to start? Like, you got to start Robbie Anderson, right? He's getting more than enough volume to hit the over on the 10 fantasy points. He just hasn't done it yet. So for those of you that think I'm crazy for starting him, What else do you want me to do? The guy's getting plenty of targets and there's nobody else there to catch the football. Chuba Hubbard's not going to get 11 targets this week. Ian Thomas and Tommy Trimble aren't going to get 11 targets this week. And I would love for Terrace Marshall Jr. to break out at some point, but if it didn't happen last week, when is it going to happen? Tennessee gets to head to Jacksonville and face a team that's kind of all over the place right now. Who knows what's going on down there in Jacksonville? Urban Meyer, calm down, buddy. Calm down, all right? You had to leave 2 different jobs now because of health issues, one of which was apparently due to your heart, and you're out there now having younger women grind up all on you. Listen. Now we know now we know you're lying. Now we know you're a liar, all right? Okay? Knock it off. Just go home. Go home and be an older guy that goes to bed early and coaches football. That's all you got to do, man. All right. Anyway, back to Tennessee versus Jacksonville. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. I don't have any updates on them yet. So I'm going to list Josh Reynolds as a start right now. He led the wide receivers last week with 9 targets, and Jacksonville does allow the 10th most fantasy points on the season to opposing wide receivers. So he'll be a start for me. But if either of A.J. Brown or Julio Jones end up coming back this week, Reynolds will move to a sit, and then one of those guys will move to a start. If both of them end up coming back, they'll both be starts. I just don't have any updates on them right now, so I got to list them as this, and then hopefully we know something by the rankings video, and I can get you all updated at that point. For Jacksonville, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault. I'm going to give you a bonus Prize Picks prop to watch in this video because I'm going to be going on the over for Laviska Shenault at 55.5 receiving yards over on Prize Picks. Last week, after DJ Chark ended up going out, Laviska Shenault had 7 targets, caught 6 of them for 99 yards. It was 16.5 yards per reception. Instead of using him at the line of scrimmage and giving him targets 2 or 3 yards away from the line of scrimmage and him just getting bullied right away, they were letting him work down the field and bully some of those smaller cornerbacks. Good job for him because it showed and that big playability came out again. So hopefully they continue to do that. He's being used differently with no DJ Chark, and I think that helps him a lot. So he is back to being a start for me this week. And for Marvin Jones, he's going to be a start. Tennessee allows the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. I'm expecting a bounce back from Marvin Jones Jr. this week. New England at Houston. And again, that sloppy game on Sunday Night Football really kind of hampered these wide receivers a little bit. But kudos to Mac Jones for just an excellent performance against that Tampa Bay defense. Tom Brady coming back to New England. He held his own. I mean, looked absolutely fantastic. But this week, going up against Houston, I just don't know. I don't know what to expect volume-wise, right? I mean, Houston got absolutely dominated. 40-point loss last week. New England on the road now. Is it going to be 40 points? Probably not. But I see more tight end here than I do wide receiver. Now, of course, Nelson Aguilar could break off a huge gain. Kendrick Bourne could haul in 6 targets or so. But I'm expecting quite a bit of Damian Harris this week. Who knows, right, with these wide receivers. But the one thing I do know is that Jakobi Meyers is getting the most targets. So he is the guy to start on this offense because he's getting enough volume to go with it. And for Houston, this team is just not good. They're not good on offense right now. Cooks, you're going to have to list him as a start again, but you're going to get inconsistent performances. Like I had him as a start last week because we know he's getting more than enough targets, but that's what I tried to warn you on the rankings video when I had him so low was like, hey, if he goes up against some tougher matchups, just because he's getting the targets doesn't necessarily mean the big players are going to be there. So New England could end up getting him a lot of fits this week. And if it does happen, I think we see the same thing with Cooks where, yeah, the targets were there. He just didn't have enough receptions. Chicago at Las Vegas. And thank you, Lazar, for finally taking the play calling back, getting it away from that bum Matt Nagy, and utilizing Justin Fields the way he should have been. Now, I would have liked it if you didn't run it as much, but I don't know what's happening with the running backs this week either, because obviously David Montgomery is going to be missing several weeks. Damian Williams is even beat up right now, so we don't know where he currently stands. So Allen Robinson is going to be a start for me. I mean, Chicago is going to have to focus on getting the ball out quick against Las Vegas. I'm anticipating Allen Robinson moving to the slot. That's what I'm anticipating this week, is him being in the slot a little bit more often. And for Darnell Mooney, like I could see him, a couple of big plays. But again, this is a Las Vegas team that gets into the backfield very quickly. I mean, even the Los Angeles Chargers saw it this past week on Monday Night Football, right? They're back there, and they're back there fast at times. It doesn't give you a whole lot of time to throw. So if Damian Williams does play, I'm expecting targets to go to him, Allen Robinson, and then we'll talk about Cole Kmet on the tight end video. Cleveland coming off a pretty tough performance on offense last week, and it's not going to get any easier because they have to head out to LA to face the Chargers this week. Odell Beckham Jr., I was high on him last week, right? I had him inside my top 12, but he would have hit 2 touchdowns and 1 other big play that Baker Mayfield missed. He overthrew him on 2. He underthrew him on 1. One of them would have likely been about a 70-yard touchdown, and it just got messed up. It got messed up. Literally this close to hitting on Odell Beckham Jr. last week. But we are going to we're going to put him as a sit this week, and we're going to go with Rashard Higgins as a start instead. Now, the Los Angeles Chargers allow the second fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. But what we saw last week with Las Vegas against the Chargers was that the Chargers utilized Hunter Renfrow, got him out to the slot, got rid of the ball quickly. Higgins is going to be the main guy for targets this week because it's going to have to be a lot of the same game plan. And actually, this is going to be my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Why? Because both of these teams are in the top 10 of fewest points allowed to opposing wide receivers. So my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Don't forget, if you head over to manscaped.com, who we're partnered with again this season, and use code word headliners, you're going to get 20% off all of their great products and free shipping. So make sure you utilize Manscaped if you haven't done so yet. But this could end up being a really bad matchup because this is a really good defensive game. That's what's going to be exciting to watch about this game. Not the offense, it's going to be the defense. The Browns, they allow the 6th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. But can you sit Keenan Allen and Mike Williams? You're not going to. It's just not going to happen, right? Yes, this could end up being a mess, and it comes down to maybe a 10-7, 14-7, 14-10 type of game. Maybe a tight end catches a touchdown pass. Maybe Austin Eckler breaks a big run, or he catches a touchdown pass out of the backfield. Maybe it's Hunt or Chubb. It could end up being really, really bad, though. But again, it kind of puts us in that situation like we talked about at the beginning of the show. You're not sitting Keenan Allen and you're not sitting Mike Williams. It just isn't happening. So you would have to be ready to take your bumps if the upside just doesn't show up in this matchup. The New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. And for the New York Giants, Kenny Galladay's probably going to see Diggs this week. And I've been talking a lot about Diggs the last couple of weeks because he's been playing so well. And he's actually had some really good matchups with some good wide receivers. So for me, Kenny Galladay just has not played well enough this season to be going up against a cornerback that's playing so well right now to actually put Kenny Galladay as a start. But who's it going to be? Who's he going to be going to, right? Who's Daniel Jones? It's going to be Kadarius Toney. And you saw him fill that Sterling Shepard role last week. Out of the slot, those quick passes over the... that is what Kadarius Toney did. He filled in for Sterling Shepard in the same role that Shepard's been eating in all season long. And as of right now, I don't have any Sterling Shepard updates, and I don't have any Darius Slayton updates. So if Shepard were to play, Shepard becomes the start, and Kadarius Toney will move to a sit. If Shepard ends up being out again, then I'm going to put Kadarius Toney as a play. It's going to be the quick passing game. They're not going to have time to hold on to the ball. That's why I've got John Ross as a sit this week. Yeah, he had that big touchdown last week, but he's not going to break one this week going up against this Dallas defense. And for the Cowboys, what are they going to be doing? Well, CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, they're back in the start column. They're going to have to bounce back. I'm just concerned about Amari Cooper. How's the hamstring? He ended up coming off the field early, but then ended up coming back and performed just well. So where is he right now? What's his percentage of health? But you can't sit him, and you can't sit CeeDee Lamb. And going up against the Giants, you got to expect Dallas will continue to run and continue to throw and be very, very balanced. So one of these guys, hopefully, has got to hit again this week. but hopefully both of them do. San Francisco at Arizona, and Deebo Samuel is on fire to start the year. He is the wide receiver 3 right now. It's a tough matchup, but you don't sit the wide receiver 3. You just don't do it. So you got to roll again with him this week. Now, Arizona is still allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So it's not like they're going up against a team that's just absolutely down. They're still, but a lot of it has to do with their offense too, because of how quickly their offense works and how much they score. So it's a little bit about a volume thing. So if things start slow for Deebo Samuel on Sunday, it's all right. Expect it to maybe pick up as the game goes on, especially if Arizona is going to be leading for a majority of the game. Now, for the Arizona Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green are going to be starts for me. Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk are sits. Now, why is Christian Kirk going to be a sit going up against San Francisco, do you ask? Well, here's the thing about Christian Kirk. Their slot cornerback, Kwan Williams, may end up being back this week, and he has shut down wide receivers in the slot on a consistent basis. In the first 2 games of the season, he only allowed 2 receptions for 37 yards. I mean, this guy in the slot is one of the better cornerbacks to start the season working there. And if he does that, if he's back this week, he's going to get Christian Kirk. And he's been so good that if Christian Kirk is on lockdown, with the way AJ Green has been playing and the need to get some more targets pushed over to DeAndre Hopkins as he starts to feel better, I just can't go with Christian Kirk this weekend, what could be a very tough matchup. Buffalo at Kansas City, and for the Buffalo Bills, Stefon Diggs, Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders are all going to be starts for me. Now, I did list Cole Beasley as a potential person to drop this past week because I felt like Dawson Knox is just getting way too many of the targets that used to go to Cole Beasley. But we're not going to drop him yet. And why is that? Because slot cornerback L'Jarius Sneed has allowed 14 receptions on 17 targets throughout the first 4 weeks. Yikes. Expect a lot of targets to go to Cole Beasley. Stefon Diggs, nice bounce back performance last week. In Kansas City, they do allow the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And with Josh Allen throwing the ball 45 times a game, especially going up against Kansas City, expect these guys to just see tons of targets this week. We're going to be starting all 3 of them. For the Kansas City Chiefs, we know Tyreek Hill is a start. There's no question there. The question comes down to is who's going to be the wide receiver 2? At times, it has been Mecole Hardman. We've seen Brian Pringle have a decent game. Demarcus Robinson is still there. And now they have added Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon is expected to be playing this week. Now, is it guaranteed? It is not. Something to monitor, but that's the only question we're asking ourselves. Who is the wide receiver 2 in Kansas City? It doesn't matter yet, though, because none of them have performed up to this point. We are on to Indianapolis, as Indianapolis will head to Baltimore for Monday Night Football. And for the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to be going with Michael Pittman as the only start this week. Baltimore does allow the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, and Pittman continues to get targets. But big plays are limited, and he's not scoring touchdowns. So again, am I looking for a big game this week? I am not. The scores have just not been there. The big plays have just not been there. But he's getting enough targets that he could luck himself in to 10 points this week. And sometimes that's just what you got to look at. For the wide receivers, for Baltimore, Brown's a weekly start now. The matchup last week, I didn't love it for him. Unfortunately, had him listed as a sit, and I paid the price for it. I paid the price for it last week. Was not expecting that big of a performance. Sammy Watkins, I'm going to go back to listing him as a sit. I did have him as a start last week, and that was one of the reasons I sat Marquise Brown, is because I thought they were going to work more. They weren't going to work the deep passing game as much as they had been. I thought they were going to have to work a little bit more of those intermediate routes, which was going to be Sammy Watkins for me. But the reason he's definitely a sit this week is because Rashad Bateman. I don't know what's going to happen with Rashad Bateman. He is practicing, but when's he going to be active again? As of right now, I'm going to list him as both as sits. I could end up changing it at some point, especially with it being Indianapolis. If Rashad Bateman were not to play, I think Sammy Watkins we could throw in there as like a low-end wide receiver 3 potentially, especially on Monday night going up against the Colts. But for now, we're just going to have to stay put. Yo, Headliner Nation, there you go. My wide receiver start and sit matchups for week 5. but it's time for me to get out of here. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Leave a like before you get out of here, though. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, and leave me a comment down below. Maybe somebody that you saw listed as a sit that should be a start, somebody that was a start that should be a sit. Let me know down in the comments below, but give me a good argument. Like, I want to hear some good, lively debate on why. Don't just say it sucks, whatever. Give me something good to work with. All right, Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. Y'all stay safe and stay healthy. I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.